Today on this beginner-friendly watercolor tutorial, I'll show you how to paint this tulip with easy to follow steps. Don't worry if you can't draw or even don't like drawing, because we provide you with a trace down and I'll tell you how you can obtain them later on in this video. So I've swatched out a lot of my colours before I use them, which is how I select my colours really easily, and I have a card on the top of your screen which explains how I do this. But we're only using 4 colours today, and all the colours and materials that I'm going to be using in this tutorial I will link in the description box underneath. I have some kitchen paper, a clean glass of water, and my little palette here from Etcher. I'm just using one brush today, which is a number 8 round. So to start with, I'm mixing this lovely ruby red colour here, and to that I'm adding a tiny bit of neutral tint. The colours that I'm using are from Schmincke, but use whichever colours that you have. So to start with, we're working wet in wet. Now this is a really great way of applying your paint, particularly if you're new to watercolour painting, because it does mean that it makes the whole application easier for you. So all we do is we apply the water where we want that paint to go, and then we just drop it in like this. It's all about building up our layers with watercolour, making sure that the first layer is dry before we apply the next. Notice that I'm just using the tip of the brush to drop in this lovely sort of muted grey tone. This will form the base colour of the tulip. So you can see I've mixed a tiny bit of yellow to that ruby red tone just to take the pinkiness out of it, and I'm just dropping it in using the tip of my brush to the outside edge. So while we're waiting for that to dry, we can go on and mix our green colour, and so the colours I'm using for this are pure yellow and cobalt blue light, and you can see I'm adding a tiny bit of blue to each of the yellow mixes so that we have different sort of ratios of yellow and blue, and just adding a tiny bit more of that yellow tone to the darker value on the end there. So once again, wet in wet. So all we're doing is applying the water where we want to drop in that paint, and just pat that brush and let that paint do the work for you. Just dropping it in like this, and you can see it's almost floating on the paper there. The paper needs to be wet but not soaking wet. We don't want it to sort of start pooling and moving around too much, but you just need it to be lovely and just a little bit of a gloss on the paper, and drop in that paint. You can see that I'm varying the colours that I'm picking up, just so that we have a sort of variation with those colours and to stop it from looking flat. So this is a beginner friendly tutorial. You can see everybody can join in with this, and like I said at the start, even if you don't like drawing, or you can't draw, or think you can't draw, then you don't have to draw it freehand, because I will put a photograph and the outline, a very simple outline for you to trace down right at the end of this video. So all you need to do there is pause the video and screenshot it, and you can print it out that way, or you can join our Facebook group, which I will link in the description box underneath, along with all the materials I'm using, so that you can join us there and post up your finished work, and of course have access to all of our outlines and reference photographs. Notice how I'm just using the brush here to tap in that colour. This is the darker green that I've mixed up. It's just the 2 colours that I use there. Again, it's the yellow colour and the blue colour, just with a darker blue shade in there. I'm adding a bit of yellow to the other green, and I'm applying this wet on dry, so that means straight onto the stem of the flower like this. Make sure that the first washes are dry, because you don't want this colour to bleed into the wet paint. So you can see I'm patting my brush in that water, patting it on, cleaning my brush in the water, patting it dry, and then just picking up the other paint and just dropping that in. You'll notice that I'm using my little puddle of water in the middle of my palette there, as opposed to my jar of water, because I don't want the water running down the tip of the brush and flooding it with water. So by having the little puddle in the middle there, it's a way of avoiding that from happening. So a little tip there for you. So just keep a little puddle of water in your palette to clean your brush. So this little leaf at the top here is dry, so I'm just adding some of that mid-tone green there to go over the middle bit here. We want this to have some variation to stop it from looking flat, so you can see me there cleaning my brush, patting it dry, and then just using that damp brush to pull up those layers into the existing wash, which is now dry, just creating that little bit of texture. Now, if you are new to my channel, we do create new tutorials here every single Tuesday. So could I ask you to give this a big thumbs up if you are enjoying it? And you may want to consider subscribing and hitting that little bell notification so that you'll be notified every week and you won't miss out on new content. This is a looser style painting and isn't strictly botanical, but if you do enjoy botanical painting and want exclusive content that's much slower paced, then we do have a Patreon. And in case this is something that interests you, let's just take a look. Are you an aspiring artist looking to take your skills to the next level? Or perhaps you're looking for fresh inspiration? Then you may want to consider joining our Patreon. Our Patreon tutorials have much more in-depth instructions and are a much slower pace, and depending on the membership level you choose, you can have personalised feedback from me and video calls. Unlike our YouTube tutorials, our Patreon art classes focus on really learning the art of botanical painting, and I will guide you step by step through the technique and skills you will need to learn and improve your botanical art. All of our Patreon tutorials are exclusive to my patrons and you won't find them on YouTube. So why not join up to our Patreon and start creating botanical art you can be truly proud of. You won't find any of our Patreon tutorials here on YouTube. They are exclusive for my patrons and are ad-free, of course, and much more detailed. So let's go to this other leaf here. I'm working once again wet in wet, so you can see that the water's a little bit discoloured there, and I was so impatient. The paint actually bled into that colour, but it doesn't matter because we can paint over it anyway. Ideally, you want every adjoining petal or leaf to be dry before you do this. So I'm just dropping in some of that bluey green tone, as you can see me doing here, and letting those colours blur into that beautiful wet paper. The paper that I'm using is a rough surface paper. I really like this kind of paper. I like the look that it gives, and I also think it's really robust, so it means that I can be a little bit more heavy-handed with my layers, and it makes it easier to kind of create darker tones. I just love this paper. This one's from Arches. I know that Arches is on the pricey side, but it's where I like to put my budget, because paints are fine, but if you can stretch to a decent quality watercolour paper, then you will definitely see a difference in your painting. So this one's from Arches, and like I said, I will put all the links in the description box underneath this video should you want to check them out. But please use the materials that you have yourself. We're all about utilising your own paints here on this channel. You don't need to go out and buy everything that I'm using, because I'm pretty sure that you'll find similar colours within your own set. We are using very basic colours today anyway, so we're mixing our own colours up. So the flower head is now dry, so I'm mixing a tiny bit of that ruby red with the yellow colour, just a tiny bit of yellow in there, and I'm working wet on dry with this number 8 size brush, so I'm able to go right up to the outside edge like this, and once I've applied that darker colour where I need it to be, clean my brush in the middle there, pat it dry, and with that damp brush I'm now blurring that colour right into that existing wash. This gives a lovely soft blurry edge, and you can see that hard edge has disappeared. I'm going to do the same on all the other petals like this, applying it like that, leaving a little gap, that's a negative space, and then applying the same on the other side, using the same procedure of cleaning my brush, patting it dry and blending it out. I do have a video explaining how I do my blending and application in more detail, which I will link to the top of your screen. We also have a playlist if you like painting, if you really enjoy painting tulips. We have an entire playlist on them, and which I'll put right at the end of this video after the outro, before just where we put the reference photograph and the line drawing. So stay tuned right until the end and you can have access to that lovely playlist. If painting tulips is your thing, then do check out that playlist. It's all free, and like I said, we even provide you with the outlines, so do check it out if that's your thing. Again, I'm adding more pigment here, so same colours as before, the ruby red with a tiny bit of that yellow colour, straight on, wet on, dry, and again just building up those colours and just dropping in that lovely colour to that damp paint there. We're charging that paper with that beautiful darker value just to give it a little bit more a little bit more brightness. So I have left the reference photograph on screen for you today. Sometimes I do, it depends on what I'm painting, but it might be useful for you to see what I'm doing as I work through. If you are new here and you don't want to miss out future videos, hit subscribe below and join our creative community right here on The Wonders of Watercolour. Earlier on in this video, I mentioned our Facebook group where you can have access to all of our outlines and references to join in with our tutorials here on YouTube. We are an incredible community, and you can also post up your finished paintings and your works in progress from our tutorials here on YouTube and get some feedback from me, my team, and our other fantastic members. If you are sort of put off a little bit by Facebook, please don't be. Give us a chance, join up, and we can give you some free advice and all that kind of stuff. So it's a fantastic community. We'd love you to be part of it. So do consider joining us, and I'll link it in the description box underneath. So again, I'm just adding a bit of that darker value that we mixed at the start. So that's the ruby red with a tiny bit of neutral tint to create a kind of really light purpley grey colour. And I'm just applying it over the levels of the layer that we applied at the start, just to give it a bit more depth of colour. Going back to that ruby red tone with the pure yellow, and I'm just putting a bit of that darker colour on the base there. Of course, this layer is dry. I'm using that brush, just the tip of that number 8 brush, to create some kind of texture, to give that flower the look of it just being a little bit less flat, creating these little shapes as I work through and until the painting is completed. Going back to that green tone, and again the leaf is now dry, so I'm putting that darker value, and by darker value I just mean a darker colour. So we have the yellow and the blue there, but a little bit more blue on this one to create that darker shade. Again, taking it down the middle to stop it from looking flat, and just carrying on using the tip of the brush and blending it in as I would ordinarily do. Using that damp brush to blend. I'm using my plain water glaze over the flower. This helps unify everything. You don't have to do this. It looks a little bit scary, but it really isn't, and it does make your painting look a lot more finished without those kind of funny little edges that you sometimes get with watercolour. remember to stay right until the end of this video so that you can pause and screenshot the outline and the reference photograph so that you can join in with me. Remember to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this video. So here's the finished painting. Let me know what you think.